So, ran. The crew is on an island, and the arborist is climbing a tree to grab an eagle baby. And so random, coincidental. I don't know what the name of the video is. There's a group of rock climbers who were climbing up Tri-Cooney Peak outside of Squamish, British Columbia, and they videotaped that being down in the snowy basin, crossing ground faster than any human could. And it's funny, so I turned this camera on secretly as I cracked open the conversation with 3 of the people in the boat. The other 2 were on the other island. I'll run it by them later. And I picked up the conversation. Sure enough, they'd heard of John Bendernagle, and but the one guy said, "Yeah, I got a video." And I'm like, "Well, what's your video?" He's kind of hesitant and held off, and I'm like, "Dude, trust me, I've seen them. It's good. You're okay. It's a safe place." And he was the person who filmed the thing at Tri-Cooney Peaks video. Squamish. Crazy, isn't it? But he didn't have too much input on the topic. He didn't seem too enthusiastic about it. Right away, he just mentioned, name dropped Jane Goodall. Well, she believed in it, and somebody else, and he spoke of some long-lost animal that hadn't been seen in Vietnam. I'm not being insulting by saying this, but if that's what your reference is to when it comes to the topic, you're a millennium behind. So I didn't push it too much. We had a little bit of a friendly chat and left it at that. So 3 out of 5 so far. Do not have too much to put towards our topic. Now, I gotta wait for these guys for I don't know how long, an hour or 2 anyway. So I'll shut the motor off. I'm drifting. And I'm gonna get some emails shared while I'm sitting here. Alright, here we go. What do we got? This is titled Resend of BWCA Encounter. Whatever that stands for, I guess we're gonna find out. Hi Steve, my name is Craig. You may use my name. I'm from northern Minnesota. I sent this encounter to you a couple years back, I believe. It may have been read, but I missed it. I've been with you since early on in the How to Hunt only stories. Anyway, here it goes, as I'm determined to get my father and uncle's encounter out in honor of both great men. It was back in the early 80s, possible late 70s, when my father and uncle took a weekend trip to their favorite wilderness retreat in the BWCA, northern Minnesota, to a lake called Trout Lake. All I know is that us boys, my cousins and I, did not go, as we were too young yet, but in later years we spent many weekends up there with our fathers. The men had set up camp at the northeast end of a huge island called Sioux Pine. It's so big, there's a small lake or pond visible from Google Earth on its interior. Anyway, my father and my uncle had set up camp and were relaxing by the fire, bullshitting and planning their attack for the next day on some incredible walleye fishing. It was late evening, dusk, but still light out, enough to see, when all of a sudden they heard a very loud kasplush in a small cove right next to their camp. They said at first they thought it was a beaver slap in the water, but shortly after they saw a large boulder/rock hit the water again, violently creating that same sound and geyser. Several more rocks hit the water, and the 2 men began to get alarmed. They both yelled at whoever was throwing the rocks to stop or else, assuming at this time it was either other campers from down the island, as there was a few sites along it. When that didn't work, my uncle took out his .357 and fired a warning shot up in the air. They both claimed after the shot went off, the woods exploded with something coming at them, extremely pissed off, breaking trees and branches in a fury. At this time, let me inform everyone that these 2 men were hardened, experienced, no bullshit military veterans who had spent their entire lives in the woods and on the waters, scared of nothing or nobody. They now were so disturbed by what was taking place that they immediately proceeded to abandon camp and get into the boat. Now, this is way back before cell phones, and unknown to my father and uncle at the time. At home, my mother and aunt were nervously watching the tornado/severe thunderstorm warnings flashing across the TV screen for the exact area their husbands, our fathers, were currently camped, many miles from help and home. The men were in the path of a huge storm. Back at the camp, the sun had set as this was all taking place, and the men could hear the rumbling and see the flashing in the distant skies. They pushed off from shore to escape whatever had invaded their camp. The storm was quickly upon them as they tried to navigate the lake. My father in the bow with a flashlight trying to guide my uncle at the motor to safety through now pouring rain, high wind/waves, and constant lightning flashes. My father later told me the sky was the scariest yet amazing color he had ever seen, almost green. They were in pitch black, trying to find a safe harbor, thinking they were heading north to the mainland, but in the confusion, they had navigated around the north end of the island and pulled up on the northwest shore of the same island, almost directly across from their original camp. As my father got out to pull up the boat, my uncle at the motor started screaming at him to get back in the boat, pointing above and behind him. My father never looked back for a second and scrambled into the bow, pushing off immediately. In the lightning flashes, my uncle had seen the silhouette of something large standing on top of the bank at the woodline above my father, who later told me there was no way in hell I was turning around to look. They pushed on through the storm once leaving that spot and finally made it across the lake to the north shore, pulled up the boat on a shale ledge, and took shelter under a tarp until morning came. The boat was swamped with water. They bailed it out at sunrise, stating it was so peaceful with the lake like glass. They made their way back to the original camp to collect their belongings with apprehension. Of course, they said trees were snapped off looking like a tornado went through the camp. They made their way home and told their wives what happened and us kids, but kept it close to the vest to this day. And for the record, they never claimed Bigfoot, just something they could not explain or rationalize. Now, Steve, as a kid, I told my friends this encounter and was ridiculed mercilessly for it. And I know my father and uncle both told very few people. But now looking back on it many decades later, I wonder if whatever chased them off didn't ultimately save them from being killed by that storm that destroyed their camp. Food for thought? Anyway, to the best of my knowledge, that is how it went down. Both men are now in their final years of life, still alive, but late 70s and early 80s in age, so I felt I wanted others to hear what they experienced. Thank you, Steve, for stepping up to the plate with you and your grandfather's encounters and bringing so many together in a common cause. If you ever get freed up to travel and are in Minnesota, I'd love to show you around and swap some hunt stories. Take care, God bless, and I'll write again to share my own interesting happenings through life with the unknown yet known. P.S. is just for you. Yeah, very strange happenings to life. All right, man, I got you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it big time. And if I get a chance, I will drop you that call. And I would love to visit Minnesota. I've had a lot of people I've met from guiding over the years live from there. A lot of Norwegian people, fellow Norwegians, live in Minnesota. And how about this? If you may feel like it one day, possibly share this video right now with your father and uncle if they're still with us today, and see if maybe your uncle wants to give you a description of what it was he saw standing on that bank. And if you are watching this, sir, thank you so much for being brave enough to share that story with your family and your children, which everybody should do. And I appreciate you. And even if you don't want to share the description, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But anyway, thanks again, man. I appreciate it. What else do we got? Check the depth. Oh, those guys. Let's see if those guys are still. Looks good. All right, what do we got? This is titled Visitor in the Night. Hi, Steve. I enjoy listening to your listeners' stories and experiences. I'm a firm believer there's a lot out there that we humans don't understand. What is reality? What is Bigfoot? What are the portals to other dimensions? I had an experience myself when I was 8 years old, way back in '65. It was a terrifying thing that I still vividly remember after all these years. I was born in England, and I lived there until I was 30 when I moved to the US. I'm pretty sure the month was October, and I wanted to stay this particular night with my grandmother, or Nana as we called her. My mother took me there. She only lived a few miles away, and it was a 2-story semi-detached house, and that night I slept on the fold-up bed in the dining room, which could be separated from the living room by these heavy velvet curtains. The door to the kitchen was closed when I went to bed. My grandparents stayed up and watched TV for a while when I went to sleep behind the closed curtains. It was a very windy night. The room was pitch black with no light whatsoever in the room, and I could hear the wind gusts battering against the windows. Nevertheless, I fell asleep. In the middle of the night, I woke up suddenly when I heard a loud crack coming from the kitchen window, immediately followed by the sound of someone entering the house. Panic and fear set in, and my heart started racing. I heard someone moving around in the kitchen. I heard paper rustling like they were looking for a bag or something. I was terrified. My heart was pumping so hard in my ears it was deafening. The door from the kitchen opened. I then heard the curtain separating the living room swoosh open. I was hiding beneath the blankets and saying the Lord's Prayer, trembling and heart pounding. Suddenly went very quiet, and as I peeked out from the bed covers to take a look, right above my head in front of my face were 2 glowing green eyes. I felt the eyes were piercing, like they could see into my head. These eyes were bright, and I'll never forget that image. I froze for a few seconds, fixated, and then dove back under the covers. I don't know exactly what happened next, except all I remember is screaming for help and that there was a burglar in the house. I could not register in my head what it was I saw. For several years I slept with the light on at night because I was afraid of the dark, until I eventually grew out of it. The house all said I had a bad dream. But that was no dream, Steve. It was real. Well, that's my story, and I've had quite a few other paranormal things happen to me over the years, and they still do happen occasionally. And that is why I have an open mind and believe anything's possible. Keep up the good work. Colin Dunleavy. Colin, thanks for the email, man. I don't know if that relates to what the majority of the people here have been seeing or not, but that's a shitty and scary thing to experience. And I have a funny feeling there's a bunch of other people that's experienced the same thing. So we have had people write in. Numerous people have written in similar experiences like that with the same description. Do I know anything about that? No. Nothing. All I can do is listen to the people and learn, right? And share it. It's a shit eater. Alright, here we go. My biologist gang is still in the island. There's no cell service here, so I can see my Zodiac on the shore. Imagine they're getting dive bombed by the Eagles by right about now. So let's get some more done. This child never knew about the red eyes. Hi Steve, first off I want to thank you for having the courage to do what you do and for speaking about things that many won't allow. It's too easy, and it's only because of people like you. I appreciate that you mentioned Jesus' name and will read biblical quotes that believers send your way. It's great to hear believers talking about their experiences without the condemnation of being told that somehow they are contradicting the Bible. I also want to thank you for your channel because it has helped me to realize that what I saw was real. Around 1980, my older sister and I were traveling from Alberta back to Manitoba via the Yellowhead Highway, Highway 16. We got a late start and both are really tired when we were near North Battleford. So my sister pulled her Ford Courier into a campground just off the highway. Her truck had a box camper on it, so she figured that I could sleep in there and she would sleep inside the truck cab. It was late August and the campground was empty. When we got out of the truck so she could unlock the camper for me, I saw something very large with glowing red eyes standing just inside the bush line about 75 yards away. I quickly looked away because they didn't want to acknowledge it and swiftly climbed back into the camper. I didn't think that my sister saw it, and I didn't want to freak her out, so I said nothing. I only had a glimpse of it, but even though I heard about Sasquatch, I didn't know that their eyes could glow so red, and I told myself that I was just punchy tired. My sister barely got into the cab, and a sudden fear came over me. My sister must have felt it too because she called out to me and said that she wanted to get going and was no longer tired. Later she told me that she saw it too and believed it walked around the truck. Ew. I'm just over 60 years old now and have had numerous experiences, but only that one regarding a Bigfoot. I witnessed a demon being cast out of a young girl, hearing it scream and go around the room before echoing out through the wall. Holy shit. I've seen UFOs numerous times, had ghost encounters, and I've heard similar stories from people that I trust. Back in the 50s, my dad was duck hunting, and he was wading into a swamp just before sunrise. All at once, the whole sky lit up into broad daylight. He looked back towards his car, and there was a large craft above it. In another instant, it was gone, and everything went back to normal. My wife's grandfather, who would now be 109 if he was alive today, told me that when he was very young, him and his brother were playing in a field overlooking Lake Winnipeg as his parents were working the field. He said they both saw a large disc-shaped aircraft fly out of the lake and over their heads. You call it the Club of No Return, and I've always considered it as having your spiritual eyes open. Same deal, though. You can't unsee what you know. In closing, I'd like to mention one more experience that my brother and I had. I've never heard anyone mention. It was around the late 60s, and we were living in Lockport, Manitoba, playing hide and seek. We decided to be brave and go sit on the back step, even though at that young age we were afraid of the dark. There was a full moon, so we calmed our fears by studying the moon and talking about craters. As we were looking at the moon, it appeared like a giant man stepped across the face of the moon. It would be like as if a man took a step and a half in front of a spotlight shining on a stage. I know that is weird, but I've wondered my whole life if anyone else saw that. My name is Norm. Please give a shout out to my friend Jay in Winnipeg that got me onto your channel. He says that he enjoys his first cup of coffee in the morning while listening to you. Thanks again, Steve. Okay, man. Thanks for the email. Those frickin' highway stops, campgrounds or not, are always such, there's so many people report experiences from doing that. Isn't it ridiculous? Truck drivers especially. It sounds like you've got a whole bunch of experiences that I'm not familiar with. And I don't think I want to be familiar with, even though I have seen UFOs myself as well. I think probably most of the population has by now, right? Here's another one. West Virginia hunter here. Steve, Logan Myers here, lifelong resident of West Virginia. You can share my name. I'll keep this brief since it's not an encounter. Here in West Virginia, we've had some very remote and vast wilderness. However, it seems like there isn't a lot of encounters with Sabe here, like our neighbors in Pennsylvania and Ohio. This is odd because our terrain and wilderness is much more rugged and remote. I believe it's because of our lack of state/government forest. It seems these people mostly live in these protected forest areas. I believe the secret all started in the States with Teddy Roosevelt, who created these protected areas and coincidentally encountered Sabe himself, as told by his memoirs. I've not encountered one in my 35 years of life, but thanks to your channel and all the people at the round table, I know how to react if I do. I hope we can all come together soon, shut down our corrupt, money-hungry, douchebag governments, and share the truth. Thanks for all you've done, and thanks to all those that have spoke out and got the secret off their backs. You're all heroes to me. I'll teach my 13-year-old son about them and continue watching. Please be safe, not from Sabe, but from the government. Thanks a million, Logan. Logan, thanks for that supportive email, man. And just so you know, there actually is quite a few stories coming from West Virginia. I've ran around those hills in West Virginia, believe it or not. And there is a fair chunk of experiences come from there. And I believe you're absolutely correct. We need to be protected from the governments, all of us. Where am I? I'm drifting. Oh, there's my boat still sitting there. My other boat. I'm guessing they're still climbing the tree. All right, let's do another one, you guys. It's titled A Lot of Noise in the Woods. Hi, Steve. Nice to see some. P.S. Sorry. And as well, you're mentioned to teach a 13-year-old son about this. Thank you so much. Everyone's got to be brave enough to teach the children. The shit they're getting taught today is absolutely atrocious. Thank you so much for teaching your son with honesty and being brave about it. Now, sorry, this is titled A Lot of Noise in the Woods. Hi, Steve. It's nice to see somebody sharing other people's encounters. I just want to say I've never seen a Bigfoot or Sasquatch, but I had a weird experience. When me and my brother were kids, my parents used to send us to summer camp in Mammoth Lakes, California, and the summer camp was called Voorhees Viking Camp. We would go up on Memorial Weekend and come home on Labor Day weekend, and the rest of the campers would come up on a Monday and leave on a Friday, so they were only there 5 days. We would be there for the whole summer. The campers would leave on Friday morning, so we would have Friday and Saturday and Sunday to ourselves, which there was probably about 6 of us left in camp. So every weekend we would hike up to 3 lakes that were behind the camp. There was Little Sherwin and Big Sherwin, and the farthest lake was Valentine Lake. Valentine Lake was about an 8-mile hike. For the first mile from my camp, it was flat until you got to the bottom of the first mountain. It was about a 4.5 to 5 mile hike up the mountain, but the trail zigzagged up to the top of the first mountain. Once you get to the top of the first mountain, that's where Little Sherwin and Big Sherwin lakes are. It's about another 2 miles to get to the second mountain to get to Valentine Lake. When we got to the top of the first mountain, we hiked about a mile, and there was a fallen tree across the trail. For some reason, it smelled bad, like something was rotting. But it wasn't like a dead animal smell, it smelled putrid. So, there was 3 of us, and we walked up to the tree, and there was a deer in between the trunk of the tree and the thick branch coming off, but only half the deer was there. There's also 16 to 17-inch footprints around the tree to where the deer was. This sounded creepy. The deer was still warm, and there was still blood coming out of it. So I think we walked up on something because, like I said, there was a bad smell in the air. And this is in 1979, and I was about 11 years old and never heard of Sasquatch or Bigfoot, so I didn't think anything of it. We continued to walk up the trail the last mile, and we come to the bottom of the second mountain, and you had to hike up that for about a mile to get to Valentine Lake. We'd go up to Valentine Lake or the other 2 lakes every weekend, and we would stay Friday night, and we'd go back to camp Sunday around lunchtime. We finally got up to Valentine Lake, and we started to smell that putrid smell again, but didn't think anything of it. We fished until it got dark and went to bed, and all we had was sleeping bags, and we slept on the ground, but we kept hearing something all night, walking around the outskirts of where we were camping, and they were big thumbs, not like a person walking. Okay, that meant big thumps, and they were big thumps, not like a person walking. The next morning I woke up and had to go to the restroom, so I walked around 300 feet from where we were camping, and I found the other half of that deer hanging in a tree about 10 feet off the ground. And some footprints were found around the tree. I really didn't smell that smell during the day. It was only at night. The whole time we were up there at night, we kept hearing something walking around our camp at night, and that is when the putrid smell was in the air. I've been going to that summer camp from about 77 to about 83 or 84. And I probably hiked up those 3 lakes at least 30 times. In that amount of time, I've never seen one person at those 3 lakes. Like I said, we never seen anything, but we heard something, and we smelled something. And there's big ass footprints everywhere. When we got back to Camp Sunday, the adult that was with us told us not to say anything about the footprints or the deer or the smell. Thought that was kind of odd. There's actually a video out, and it's called The Mono Lake Bigfoot. That's near Mammoth Lake, California. And it was a family that was at Mono Lake, and they were just videotaping, and I guess a couple of years later they looked at the video, and they actually captured what looked to me like a Bigfoot while videotaping. My name is David Roberts, and if you do read this, you have permission to use my name. The funny part is, I talk to people every day, and within 10 minutes I can't even remember their name. But I remember this like it was yesterday. Thanks for listening, and happy hunting. David, appreciate you, man. Thanks for sending that in. And you know what I'm gonna say? You're emailing me and everybody through me on this channel. You know what it was. You know what it was now. You 110% know what it was now. It is odd. One thing I find odd Like, I've got a lot of places I go to and I've never had an experience, but I never ever discount it. How many people out there, how many of you out there have hunted the same property all your life, been living on the same property for 2 or 3 generations, whatever, never had an inkling, and all of a sudden here's one of those damn things standing there, right? So just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to, right? Unfortunately. All right, let's get another one shared out here. You can see the shoreline. I'm guessing, I'll bet you they're lowering a baby eagle to the ground right about now. Something best for days up there, but it's not too bad. It's not windy at least. Sighting of a Bigfoot many years ago. Excuse me. All my younger childhood years, my immediate family and I lived in Toronto, Ontario. During the summers, we would all go to a small town in northwestern Ontario near Kenora, Ontario. The family moved from Toronto to this small town in '66. For me as a small child, this fact becomes integral to what I'm about to tell you. The family always went to our grandparents' island on Rainy Lake to spend our summers. My grandfather taught me everything I know to this day about being in the woods, including survival in the woods in -40 in the harsh winters there. He taught me so much that I was asked later in my life to teach others some of these skills, which I gladly did. Once I was 10, I would have been 64. My grandfather finally allowed me to go camping by myself. The island is only about 3... Oh shit, I've read this. Read it.
A lot of driving for this thing for a while.
Two swamps. Lots of boarding with that.
What's that?
Then lots of